Many important aspects of human development relate also to people's security, loosely defined as people's freedom from fear and freedom from want in a broad sense. Applying a human security approach offers an opportunity to analyze many issues in an informative way. This note explains how one might go about doing that. Human security relates to much more than security from violence and crime. A report team wanting to look at the security of people's livelihoods, including economic, food, environment, or health security, might apply a human security approach. Human security can also be used to look into personal, community, and political security. Indeed, human development reports from around the world have applied the approach in other innovative ways. But on each occasion, these reports have analyzed a threat or groups of threats and how they differ and how they affect particular groups of people. And so, if one is interested in preparing a human development report that is focused on one or more of the threats people face, then a human security approach is worth considering. This note explains how such an approach could help and how it might be applied. In this video presentation, we will be discussing about the following topics. First is human security and development, followed by human insecurities and its root causes. Third is the evolution of human security. Fourth is the triangular relationship between human development, human security, and human rights. And last is about the dimensions of human security. Before entering into the core issue of human security, it is very much relevant to discuss and define the term security. Security is the safe and secure condition for an individual, group, organization, institution, system, entity, or phenomenon from harm or hostile acts. It is the absence of harm or danger and presence of an essential condition, foundation, secrecy, containment, and state of mind. Morgenthau defines security as the integrity of the national territory and its institution in the year 1958. The key theme behind such belief is if the state is secured, everything will be secured. Let us first define the concept of human development. Human development is about expanding the richness of human life, rather than simply the richness of the economy in which human beings live. It is an approach that is focused on the people and their opportunities and choices. It is about giving people more freedom to live lives that they value. Human development is fundamentally about more choices. It is about providing people with opportunities, not insisting that they make use of them. No one can guarantee human happiness, and the choices people make are their own concern. This focuses on improving the lives people lead rather than assuming that economic growth will lead automatically to greater well-being for all. Income growth is seen as a means to development rather than an end in itself. The process of human development should at least create an environment for people individually and collectively to develop to their full potential and to have a reasonable chance of leading productive and creative lives that they value. According to the General Assembly in Resolution 66-290, human security is an approach to assist member states in identifying and addressing widespread and cross-cutting challenges to the survival, livelihood, and dignity of their people. What is human security? It is the brainchild of Harvard graduate former Finance Minister of Pakistan, Dr. Mahbub ul Haq, Special Advisor, while preparing the Human Development Report of the United Nations. Once it was published, the report got momentum worldwide. The human security approach was first introduced in the year 1994 during the Global Human Development Report, more commonly known as the HDR, which led to a range of literature and initiatives building on the idea and to a series of discussion in the United Nations. In the year 2012, the General Assembly or GA adopted a common definition of the concept. The human security approach broadens the scope of security analysis and policy from territorial security to the security of the people. The 2012 GA resolution stresses the role of member states in identifying and addressing widespread and cross-cutting challenges to survival, livelihood, and dignity of their people. In other words, threat or threats to and values under threat in people's lives are the key starting point of a human security report. The 1994 HDR highlighted two major components of human security: freedom from fear and freedom from want. These freedoms, from the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are part of the four human freedoms that President Franklin D. Roosevelt famously referred to in a speech in 1941. He was advocating a world founded on freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Subsequent debate in the year 1990s added the freedom to live in dignity. Central to the approach is the idea that people have the right to live in freedom and dignity, free from poverty and despair, with an equal opportunity to enjoy all the rights and fully develop their human potential. The United Nations Charter and the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights 1948, along with its associated covenants 1996 and conventions related to crime and rights of a special group, are the key legal instruments to govern human security. The United Nations declared the Year of Indigenous People in the year 1993 to highlight the existing vulnerability of the 300 million Aboriginal people in almost 70 countries who face widespread violence. Along with the United Nations, many development institutions are also committed to human security, like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The human security entered into the European Union agenda in the year 2000. In such contexts, when instruments of traditional security became ineffective to resolve the insecurity issues, the Commission on Human Security or CHS was created in 2001, chaired by former United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Sadako Ogata and Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. The aim of the CHS is to promote the understanding of human security and implement its organizing members of conferences, meetings, and workshops are being organized by the CHS or the Commission on Human Security in order to intensify the commitment to human security. Here is a summary of the context of human security and human development for us to better understand its context. For human security, it is about assuring priority freedom so that people can exercise choice safely and freely. And for human development, it is a broad concept aiming at enlarging people's choices and freedoms. Next is we will be discussing the dimensions of human security. We have four dimensions of human security. First is the economic security, followed by the food security. Third is our health security. Fourth is environmental security. Fifth is personal security. While sixth is community security. And last is political security. Economic security requires an assured basic income for individuals, usually from productive and remunerative work, or a last resort, from a publicly financed safety net. In this sense, only about a quarter of the world's people are presently economically secure. While the economic security problem may be more serious in developing countries, concerns also arises in developed countries as well. Unemployment problems constitute an important factor underlying political tensions and ethnic violence. Food security requires that all people at all times have both physical and economic access to basic food. According to the United Nations, the overall availability of food is not a problem. Rather, the problem often is the poor distribution of food and the lack of purchasing power. In the past, food security problems have been dealt with at both national and global levels. However, their impacts are limited. According to the United Nations, the key is to tackle the problems relating to access to assets, work, and a short income, which is very much related to economic security. Health security aims to guarantee a minimum protection from diseases and unhealthy lifestyle. In developing countries, the major causes of death traditionally were infectious and parasitic diseases, whereas in industrialized countries, the major killers were the diseases of the circulatory system. Today, lifestyle-related chronic diseases are leading killers worldwide, with 80% of deaths from chronic diseases occurring in low and middle income countries. According to the United Nations, in both developing and industrial countries, threats to health security are usually greater for poor people in rural areas, particularly children. This is due to malnutrition and insufficient access to health services, clean water, and other basic necessities. Environmental security aims to protect people from the short and long-term ravages of nature, man-made threats in nature, and deterioration of the natural environment. In developing countries, lack of access to clean water resources is one of the greatest environmental threats. In industrial countries, one of the major threats is air pollution. Global warming caused by the emission of greenhouse gases is another environmental security issue. Personal security aims to protect people from physical violence, whether from the state of external states, from violent individuals and sub-state actors, from domestic abuse, or from predatory adults. For many people, the greatest source of anxiety is crime, particularly violent crimes. Community security aims to protect people from the loss of traditional relationships and values from sectarian and ethnic violence. Traditional communities, particularly minority ethnic groups, are often threatened. About half of the world's states have experienced some inter-ethnic strife. The United Nations declared 1993 as the Year of Indigenous People to highlight the continuing vulnerability of the 300 million Aboriginal people in 70 countries as they face a widening spiral of violence. Political security is concerned with whether people live in a society that honors their basic human rights. According to a survey conducted by Amnesty International, political repression, systematic torture, ill treatment, or disappearance was still practiced in 110 countries. Human rights violations are most frequent during periods of political unrest. Along with repressing individuals and groups, governments may try to exercise control over ideas and information. In an ideal world, each of the UNDP 7 categories of threats and perhaps others as a broader discussion might prioritize would receive adequate global attention and resources. Yet, attempts to implement this human security agenda have led to the emergence of two major schools of thought on how to best practice human security. One is freedom from fear, and the other is freedom from want. While the UNDP's 1994 report originally argued that human security requires attention to both freedom from fear and freedom from want, divisions have gradually emerged over the proper scope of that protection. Example, over what threats individuals should have be protected from, and over the appropriate mechanisms for responding to these threats. The seven dimensions of human security agendas are broadly divided again into two major schools of thought, namely the freedom from fear and freedom from want, in the HDR of the UNDP's 1994. The differences between two approaches is described in the succeeding paragraphs. The notion of freedom from want and freedom from fear. In freedom from fear, this approach focuses on protecting human beings from the threats generated by violent conflicts associated with poverty, state inabilities, and inequalities. The idea behind this approach is limiting the focus to violence in a realistic and manageable way. Emergency assistance, conflict resolutions, and peace building are the tools to achieve it. The humanitarian intervention responsibility is Protect or R2P is an initiative in this regard. The school seeks to limit the practice of human security to protecting individuals from violent conflicts while recognizing that these violent threats are strongly associated with poverty, lack of state capacity, and other forms of inequities. This approach argues that limiting the focus to violence is a realistic and manageable approach towards human security. Emergency assistance, conflict prevention and resolution, and peace building are the main concerns of this approach. Canada, for example, was a critical player in the efforts to ban landmines and has incorporated the freedom from fear agenda as a primary component in its own foreign policy. However, whether such narrow approach can truly serve its purpose in guaranteeing more fruitful results remains to be an issue. For instance, the conflicts in Darfur are often used in questioning the effectiveness of the responsibility to protect, a key component of the freedom from fear agenda. While for freedom from want, this is a holistic approach which advocates that the agenda of human security has to be broadened, including hunger, diseases, and natural disasters. These aspects are inevitable to address the root causes of threats to human beings. Considering the fact above threats are killing more people than the combined threats of war, genocide, and terrorism. This approach goes beyond the idea of freedom from fear and emphasizes on the development and security goals. The school advocates a holistic approach in achieving human security and argues that the threat agenda should be broadened to include hunger, disease, and natural disasters because they are inseparable concepts in addressing the roots of human insecurity, and they kill far more people than war, genocide, and terrorism combined. Different from freedom from fear, it expands the focus beyond violence with emphasis on development and security goals. The notions of freedom from fear and want are complementary to each other. Apart from want and fear, issue of protection has also been the debated issue afterward and made the concept of freedom from want, freedom from fear, and beyond. Triangular relationship between human security, human rights, and development. Former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan similarly stressed the positive correlation among human rights, security, and development. In his report regarding the larger freedom towards development, security, and human rights for all, he created the triangle of interconnected elements which include security, human rights, and development. In his opinion, the notion of larger freedom that was introduced in his report encapsulates the idea that development, security, and human rights go hand in hand and increasingly reinforce each other. This relationship has only been strengthened in our era of rapid technological advances, increasing coincidence, globalization, and dramatic geopolitical changes. Next is we will be discussing the challenges to human security. To ensure human security to every people is an uphill task. Multi-pronged challenges tend to prevail to it. Human security deprivations can undermine peace and stability within and between states. Major challenges to human security which undermines the expected outcomes are listed in these PowerPoint presentations. Climate change and environmental degradation. It has profound implications for people's livelihood. It causes environmental degradation and endangers the ecosystem and disrupts a human life support system, establishing a notorious nexus between climate change and human security. UNGA 2004. Unchecked population growth. Currently, the world population has reached more than 7 billion. The rapid population growth is overcrowding the planet day by day, resulting in enormous pressure in diminishing renewable energy resources. Fricks and Goldwick 2007. Disparities in economic opportunities. The gross domestic product or GDP and per capita income are distributed in a large and equal manner nationally and internationally. Large number world population who are wealth deprived has a low life expectancy and is unable to satisfy basic human security standards. Excessive migration and refugees. At the time of HDR publication, the figure of international migration was 35 million. Internally displaced people or IDPs 20 million and refugees were 19 million from Battersby and Syracuse 2009. The statistics are rising up at present due to poverty, conflicts, uneven development pattern, and so on. Civil strife and wars. The prolonged interstate strife, insurgencies, civil wars, and proxy wars ongoing in many parts of the world are undermining the essence of human security. Terrorism. The act of violence to terrorize the target has increasingly been the tactics of non-state actors. Such inhuman acts are almost taking place in every part of the world, resulting life and property damage of innocent people. Drug trafficking and organized crimes. The narcotic drugs traffic has been a serious challenge to human security. The illegal trade is transaction equal to thousands of billion dollars per annum. The illegal cash flow, evading the tax, and multifaceted negative impacts of drug consumptions in the societies are unbearable. For this activity, you will be doing a tree chart. In this activity, you are to determine the threats that we are experiencing or that we've encountered based on the Human Security Report. Then indicate the root cause and determine or suggest a possible solution in solving the problem.